Yes, the economy may be great for those folks, but it is absolutely not booming for the nearly 80% of American workers who live paycheck to paycheck, desperately hoping that their child doesn't get sick, praying that their car doesn't break down, or that they don't lose their job. Despite what President Trump says, this is not a hot economy when 43% of households can't afford to pay for housing, food, childcare, healthcare, transportation, and a cell phone without going into debt. That is not a hot economy for ordinary Americans.
Our correspondent in Washington is Simon Marks. Simon, good morning. How conciliatory was this speech from Donald Trump?
Well, I mean, it was just an extraordinary display, Susie, of political personality disorder. I don't think we've seen anything quite like it in the United States since Al Gore ran for the presidency. And listeners of a certain vintage will remember that over the 3 presidential debates, every single time he showed up, there was a different personality on display. Donald Trump's day began with a meeting with television news anchors at the White House, a private lunch in which he used profanities to describe Senator Charles Schumer, the Democrat leader in the US Senate. And then his day ended with the President of the United States asking Congress to choose greatness and insisting that if only the Democrats and Republicans could transcend their divisions, everything in this country would be all right. And even during the course of the speech, he undid what he had tried to set in chain there by rounding on Democrats. And at one point in the speech, even accusing one Democrat, the beleaguered governor of Virginia, of planning to execute babies. So this was far from a conciliatory speech if you look at the entire speech en masse or the president's day en masse. But certainly he went through the motions, as presidents always do in the State of the Union, of saying to his opponents, if only we could bury the hatchet, surely it would be much better if we could all just get along.
There was one point at least where I think probably every single person in the room clapped, and that was around the number of women that have now been elected.
Yes, absolutely. And that was the one point in the speech where many of those women who are newly elected Democrats to the House of Representatives actually got up off their seats and applauded what the president was saying. There was one other moment as well where he secured universal applause, and that was when he unveiled a new strategy that he says aims to overcome the epidemic of HIV in the United States over the course of the next 10 years. He didn't go into many details about how he plans to fund it, but it went down well in the room. Much better in the room, I think it's worth saying, than his announcement that he's going to hold another summit meeting with Kim Jong-un in Vietnam later this month. There was only very tepid applause at that point, coming from a smattering of Republicans in the room, because the president knows that many of them think that he's on the wrong track in his negotiations with the North Koreans. There was also a smattering of applause when he hit out at what he referred to as ridiculous partisan investigations into his campaign, his inauguration, and now his presidency. It was clear that many Republicans in the room were very uncomfortable with that attack as well.
And of course, the context of all of this, he's still talking about building his wall, and that is why this speech was delayed in the first place. Yeah,
and we're 9 days away from another possible government shutdown. I mean, it is interesting that he didn't use the speech to say in very clear terms that he will allow the government to shut down again in 9 days' time if there's no agreement over the $5.7 billion that he wants to build the wall along the US border with Mexico. And it was also notable that he didn't even threaten the declaration of a national emergency that he says would allow him to build the wall without congressional approval and funding. There had been some expectation that he might use the speech actually to declare that national emergency. So where we all now stand in terms of another possible government shutdown is pretty unclear.
Thank you very much for the analysis there. That's Simon Marks. He's our correspondent in Washington, D.C. It's 5 to 8.
Just a note that the press conference in Nelson about the fires is just getting underway. This is the latest response to the fire and its impacts. We are streaming this video online. You can see it on rnz.co.nz or on the Morning Report Facebook page. That's facebook.com/NZ Morning Report, and we'll bring you the latest from that after the 8 o'clock news. Before that, let's talk Waitangi Day. Thousands of people attended events at Waitangi yesterday, marking the 179th anniversary of the signing of the treaty. It was a mixture of formalities, kai waka, and a real carnival atmosphere under some pretty sunny skies. Our reporter Andrew McCrea was there and looks back on the day.
Mist hung over the bay as over 1,000 people made their way in the dark to the dawn church service in the Whare-Runanga. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was one of those who spoke.
God of the southern seas and of these sparkling islands, of Māori and Pākehā, of all who call Aotearoa New Zealand home, we say thanks for this, our beautiful country, and for the perfect stillness of this moment at the dawn of Waitangi Day.
At the end of the service, a lone piper played a lament as the sun started to rise over the water. And for the many people who got up early, it was barbecue kai served by the Prime Minister and some of her team.
It was very nice, yes.
What did you have this morning?
Just bacon and sausages and
everything that was on offer, just the, the sausages and the eggs and the bacon.
The highlight for many visitors to Waitangi on our National Day is the sight of waka out on the bay. 13, some with mixed crews, paddled under the bridge, coming ashore on Titi Beach. After a karakia, they set out in formation. A mid-morning church service was held outside the Whare-Runanga, attracting a large congregation. It wrapped up in time for the Navy's HMNZS Wellington, anchored in the bay, to fire a 21-gun salute. Locals mingled with people from across Aotearoa and overseas, enjoying the day.
It's excellent. It's well organised. The different cultures, it's a lot more friendly, I think. Well, after many years of hoo-ha or whatever.
Peaceful. Lovely. People are kind. All people. You feel welcome here.
I'm from Scotland. I was in the area. I didn't really know this was happening, and I've just come along and to see what's happening.
I certainly have got the feeling. I've of course been around for the last couple of days for various events, and it has been a very positive atmosphere. People getting together, enjoying time together.
It's estimated that about 30,000 people spent the day at Waitangi. It's the second year that all major events around the commemoration were held on the treaty grounds and not Te Marae. The Chief Executive of the Waitangi National Trust, Greg McManus, says they strive to improve on the event each year.
And also trying to accommodate all of the different groups that want their space, want their time, and just trying to help everyone achieve what they want to achieve.
He says it's a bit of a juggling act to try and keep everyone happy.
We work really hard with all of the different groups that want to come here and maybe protest or make a point to let them do what they want to do, but not impinge on the experience of other people. And I think that's the joy, really, is that you look around right now, there's so many different types of people from all over the world mixing and mingling together.
The day's events came to an end with the Navy performing its beat retreat ceremony on the treaty grounds. A 100-person Guard of Honour, the Navy Band and the Defence Force Cultural Group brought a curtain down on another Waitangi Day. I Waitangi for Morning Report, ko Andrew McCrea tēnei.
Ngāti Maria, good morning. You're listening to Morning Reports. Coming up after 8 o'clock this morning, the police and emergency services are giving a briefing on the fires blazing in Nelson. We'll bring you the latest. We'll also be talking to the Agriculture Minister about the impact on farms and lifestyle blocks. Also, Waitangi Day protests call for urgent changes to wastewater management in the Hokianga Harbour.
RNZ News at 8. Good morning. I'm Nicola Wright. Fire and Emergency says today will be critical in the fight against the Nelson bushfire as forecast strong winds move closer. It says more firefighters and more heavy machinery have been brought in to create fire breaks and douse the flames, and aircraft, including up to 16 helicopters, will join them. An emergency services briefing on the situation this morning is just getting underway. Fire and Emergency's Incident Controller John Sutton says the fire stayed within a 22-kilometre perimeter overnight, although it was threatening parts of that and still...
How is everybody? We need a bigger room. Yeah, we do, don't we? And better muffins. Right, I'll spruce up my cooking. Exactly. Yeah, actually, that would probably take. That'd be a nice touch if I cook. Morning. Police. Okay. How are you this morning? Now you see people, now you don't. Doesn't sound okay, that's fine, just making sure we have got the same numbers. Nothing else worse than me saying one thing and you saying another. Right, let's get around and get okay. Ready? Yeah. I'll stand on this side of okay, thank you. Here we are. So, are we ready to go? Is everyone all set? The police are just coming. Are they coming through the door yet? Just the zones, yeah. Okay, zones here, right. Look, good morning everybody. So this is an update on the fire. You'll be aware that we had a roaring fire 2 days ago and it was impossible to control, and it was just protection of properties and people was paramount, but a lot couldn't be done. Yesterday the wind direction turned, and as you'll be aware, it was a much calmer day, mild breezes and much more effective for firefighting. But we do have 1,900 hectares of bush that has been burnt and a lot of hot spots that are still smoking. They could easily flare up if the weather turns and if there is particularly southerly winds, which we do expect in a few days' time. So we've got a couple of days of good conditions, and hopefully we can have the firefighting will be able to have good effect. The firefighters have done a tremendous job. The focus has been on keeping people and property safe, people first. I really appreciate how people have been respectful and evacuated, but of course if there are people with either pets or particularly stock, then they're starting to get a bit stressed and wanting to get back. However, we are led by fire and police in wanting to ensure that people stay safe, so the evacuation is still in place. And the reality is it's likely to be for several days more, and we just have to keep a watching brief, and the various authorities will be updating people continually from either day to day or during the day. So thanks to everybody who has evacuated. We would appreciate your patience, know that for some it's really quite frustrating, and the various authorities are doing everything we can. We do have a civil defence declaration in place so that if the weather turns bad and further evacuations are needed, they can be done in an orderly manner. But I think you have other members who will talk about specific details, so I'm happy to take any questions, or I'll hand over to Roger from Civil Defence. Roger.
Thank you, Mayor Richard. Good morning. Roger Ball, Civil Defence Group Controller for Nelson Tasman. Good progress was made last night through the efforts of Fire and Emergency New Zealand. I'll let my colleagues speak to that in more details. But let me give you a few numbers. We were able to reconcile last night, and just to confirm, 182 properties were evacuated as a result of this event, and 400 people are evacuated as a result of this event. We confirmed last night through Fire and Emergency New Zealand that one property has been lost, and that currently we have the area of the fire contained within a cordon with 10 cordon control points. Today's priorities continue to be to protect life, property and infrastructure. We need to extinguish, obviously, the fire through the efforts of Fire and Emergency New Zealand. We are continuing to mobilise our resources. This is a major event which is beyond the capacity of local agencies. And fourthly, we need to continue to support and communicate to our community. So those are our overall priorities today. We are commencing a rapid assessment in the Pigeon Valley area this morning. That will be staff from Fire and Emergency New Zealand, but also a building inspector who is trained in urban search and rescue from the Tasman District Council. With that information, we will commence planning that will inform us as we start to look at our cordon management and our ability to manage some kind of access eventually for residents. We have a community meeting this morning taking place at 9 a.m. at the Appleby Fire Station. That is for affected residents, and we'll be talking to them about the situation, about the cordon management and what they can expect over the next few days. Mayor Kempthorne mentioned the stress on animals and the anxiety that can cause. We have opened a facility at the AMP showgrounds where we have stables, paddocks and gated areas, and we can accommodate their stock, including horses, sheep, cattle, goats. We have the ability to look after companion animals at our Civil Defence Centre in Wakefield. That Civil Defence Centre remained open overnight, and we encourage anybody who is evacuated or who might need support to make themselves known there. It is the St John's Anglican Church on Edward Street. If you cannot make it in, please call us on the Tasman District Council main line 03 543 8400. That's all I have for you this morning. I'm happy to answer questions, otherwise I'll hand over to John Sutton.
Roger, is this a fire that is still out of control? Can we still use that term, or we got past that point?
I'm going to let Fire and Emergency New Zealand speak to the fire and the conditions there. I think that's their area of expertise. Any other questions for me? All right, John.
Thank you, Roger. And morning, everybody. My name's John Sutton. I'm Incident Controller of one of the National Fire and Emergency Management teams. We come in yesterday and had a quick briefing, and then I had an overflight of the fire area. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge all the great work that's gone on before we got here by the local emergency management team, by Civil Defence, and all of the volunteers and other supporting agencies. This is a multi-agency response, and the work that's gone on before us is fantastic in terms of structural protection. I think it's really hasn't been acknowledged, just the great work that a whole range of firefighters have done to protect particularly houses. And it's sad to hear about losing one house, but I've got to put that in perspective. There's an enormous amount of work done. You can see when you have a look that there's paint blistered on houses. That's how close the fire has been to a lot of those residents, but they've been successfully protected by some very good work. Our focus from here is exactly as Roger has said. It is firstly the protection of life and property, and then infrastructure, and then other assets. We had a very good day yesterday. The weather was rather benevolent in terms of for firefighting purposes, and we're going to have a similar day today. So these days are really, really important. It's time that where we invest in hardening the perimeters as much as we can, so we're best prepared for increased weather conditions, which are predicted from tomorrow onwards. We are very wary of the fact that the wind is likely to increase, and that's probably our worst enemy at the moment, will be wind. Wind is what transfers embers and makes causes the fire to rapidly move across the landscape, and that's exactly what happened the day before yesterday. You get in situations where humans can do nothing to intervene with that fire. So really at the moment we're trying to work as strategically as possible to ensure that we can achieve some measure of control. At the moment we would describe this fire as out of control. It didn't progress anywhere in its perimeters yesterday, but that's more to do with the benign conditions and work that we were doing directly on the perimeter so it couldn't spread. But at this stage I couldn't say that we have any sense of any containment of that fire. Certainly I'd like to be able to say that by the end of today that we do have a measure of containment. At the moment, I've just come from the operational briefing this morning at 0700, and there's approximately 100 firefighters that have been directed onto the fire ground this morning. There's 22 helicopters available for operations. There are 2 fixed wings on site, another third one is coming in today. There's approximately 20 pieces of heavy machinery, that's bulldozers and excavators, that are putting in fire breaks in specific places where there is a lot of heat, and where we're concerned about future possible fire behaviour will occur and pressure our borders. So we've got a big day on today. Fortunately the weather is in our favour, and let's hope that it continues through the day as predicted, to be reasonably kind to us, and that we can make some real inroads in securing perimeter. Happy to take questions.
John, how's the water resource holding up?
Water is very good. We're quite lucky in that there's a river nearby, and we're able to dig water dams pretty well at will. So there's not a lot of ferry time between getting to the water supply for the monsoon buckets to the fire. So that's quite fortunate, yes.
John, how are the firefighters? They've been there for almost 2.5 days. There's some of them doing long hours.
Yes, I personally noticed some of the effects of fatigue of some of them, and we're trying to bring in more firefighters from outside of the region so we can get some rotation. It's one of the reasons why my team has come down here to help run this fire operation, is really to give the locals a bit of a break, so they can recharge their batteries and get back into the fry. It's, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the extra resources that are coming from out of the region, maybe NZDF supplying some firefighters and other regions?
Yes, we're being very well supported by the Defence Forces. There's 3 crew and units coming in today. One's actually already arrived, another 2 on the way, and there's a promise of more resources should we need them in the future. Fire and Emergency is providing firefighters from other regions which may have less fire activity than this region at present, and also the Department of Conservation. I think there's 8 crews coming from them today.
Yeah, and just finally, can you maybe talk a bit more about sort of the current seriousness of the situation? Because I know Richard said it hadn't spread more than 1,900 hectares, but then you've just described it as still out of control. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Okay, the perimeter didn't expand yesterday, but there's significant internal burning. When fire goes through the landscape, it doesn't go with a sort of a clean sweep. It goes rapidly in some places and a lot slower in others, so you end up with large islands of unburnt fuel that's still actively burning, and they are a threat depending on how far they are from a perimeter, because as I said, the thing that rapidly will spread a fire is the ember transport, which wind moves. So what I mean is we don't have total control of that area. We're just fortunate it didn't actually grow any yesterday, but that's more because of the weather conditions rather than the work that the results of our work yet. But I would expect by the end of the day we'll be able to say that we have containment. And when we talk about containment, that means there has to be no known heat, from embers or any active burning within 30 metres from the perimeter.
Do we know at all, obviously it's early days, but do we have any idea how it actually started?
Yes, that we've got a fire investigator working on that fire, and at this stage it's almost certain that it's as a result of agricultural machinery, a spark from agricultural machinery.
So a tractor?
There was a tractor towing discs in a rocky field, and it's it's pretty, I wouldn't say certain, but it's highly likely that's how it started.
And is the owner of the tractor aware that it was likely theirs?
Yes.
And how have they reacted?
Oh, I think mortified. It's an accidental event. It's certainly nothing that anyone would hope to happen.
So it's just an accidental. No, they're not likely to be, what's the word, punished.
Oh no, I mean it's a totally unintended consequence, really. Yeah.
Well, just on that, then, what are farmers supposed to do in this region? It's very dry at the moment. Are they supposed to, I guess, I don't know if it's for you to say, but are they just supposed to not operate this machinery when this thing could happen?
Well, certainly, we were advised that, roadside mowing and any of those types of operations that are likely to create sparks that could start ignitions, that those operations be suspended.
They have ceased.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. All
right. Good morning, Zane Hooper from the New Zealand Police, currently the Acting District Commander for the Tasman area. New Zealand Police continue to support the emergency response to the fires, and principally our role has been evacuating people from areas declared by the Civil Defence or FENS that need to be evacuated for public safety, and reinforcing cordons where cordons are in place, and providing patrols around the perimeter of the evacuated areas. Yesterday afternoon, an additional 40 police staff flew in or drove from the Canterbury and Wellington districts to support our operation. Currently, approximately 75 police staff are committed to the fire operation outside of normal policing business as usual, which we continue to maintain. You've heard already there's approximately 10 cordons currently in place. Of those cordons, some of those cordons involve supporting the helicopter function, so they are in place while the helicopters are flying. Approximately 8 of those cordons relate to restricting public access to either evacuated areas or to areas where, upon instruction from the Civil Defence, informed by FENS, we do not want the public going in interests of their safety. 182 properties have been evacuated, and as part of that we understand how eager our community are to return to their homes and their residences and tend to their animals. In the interests of safety, currently those areas remain evacuated, and we are working on a plan with Civil Defence and FENS going forward in relation to when it is safe for people to return to their properties, how that can occur. You've heard this morning that a reconnaissance is underway with FENS and building staff in the affected areas to commence looking forward in relation to returning people to their properties. For people who have been evacuated, if they have genuine welfare concerns about something that exists within their property in relation to their animals or their wider property, we would ask you to ring the Civil Defence on 03 543 8400 and make direct contact with them. We would ask that every person who has been evacuated at the request of police makes contact with Civil Defence and records your details, how you can be contacted, emergency numbers. So as part of our plan for people to be able to re-enter, we can make direct contact with you. We would equally ask, please, that people do not approach the cordon staff and ask them for information, but rather go to the website, listen to the radio, and stay out of the operating area where FEN staff, New Zealand Police, are trying to deal with the fire incident. There is welfare support in place to assist you with any concerns. And if you have any immediate concerns for your safety, then obviously we'd ask people to ring 111. Currently there are no areas planned for evacuation at this stage as a result of the fire being contained within that 1900 hectare area. However, we would please ask the community in the wider fire area to remain vigilant, to have plans in place should they be asked to evacuate, and to be able to do that at short notice. If there's any questions, prepared to have those now.
We just spoke about before about the cause of the fire, and I know John mentioned that it's unlikely, it was an accident if it's proven. Do New Zealand Police share the same position that it's unlikely these people will be punished or face any consequences for this, given there are fire warnings in place?
Yeah, so in relation to the initiation of the fire investigation staff go and make that assessment. We will support them as required, but you've heard the sit rep as to what they believe started the fire, and that would be upon their advice. So.
Have people tried to get back through the cordons to their stock?
So, look, our community are clearly concerned, and we share the concern. We want to facilitate their return to their properties as soon as we can. So people have approached the cordons wanting to get to their properties, and we've provided them the advice to refer to those websites and listen to the radio. And we're setting up a communication plan today in relation to using the contact details that they need to provide us around updating them on what the progress will be.
So they might hear something today about when it's possible.
So there's a community meeting this morning at 9 o'clock where we're encouraging all those residents to attend, and we'll have further information for them.
Does anybody know yet of the value of the loss of forestry?
We haven't seen an estimate on that as yet, Tracy.
What about the costs of firefighting to date?
I think the main thing is fight the fire, put it out, and then we'll worry about the costs, which I'm sure will be a big worry.
We're just starting to monitor costs, so probably by the end of the day we might have an estimate.
The Prime Minister is here later this morning. Will you be asking for extra resources or extra help?
So at this stage we have very good access through a number of agencies to additional resources. You've heard this morning that we have additional police coming in, fire and emergency are bringing in their own teams, DOC, NZDF are providing 32 staff this morning, including fighting appliances. We have Red Cross volunteers, we have Civil Defence emergency response teams coming over from Marlborough and staff coming in from Marlborough, West Coast and Canterbury. So at this point we're reasonably comfortable that we've got a good allocation of resource, but we know that as the Minister for Civil Defence and Emergency Management has said to us yesterday, if there's anything we need, we know who to call. So we're mindful that we're in this for the long run.
Roger, are you satisfied that the messages are getting through to the community from Civil Defence through the right channels?
Oh, look, I know that not everybody is getting what they need, and we're working hard to make sure that our communications are as frequent and as effective and up-to-date as possible, and we've got good resource to do that. And that's why we're commencing our outbound calling today to the affected residents and inviting them to a community meeting, and we'll be repeating those meetings.
And just could I come back to the question about government resource? One of the other things I should have mentioned is I'll be reactivating my Mayor's Relief Fund. We set that up last year with Cyclone Gita, so we'll reactivate that this year, and I'm sure there will be discussions with government as to how they can help in that regard. And there have been other people and communities within New Zealand saying, how can we help? And we're likely to give that message to them as well.
Are you going to ask Jacinda Ardern directly for money for that fund?
Oh, I'm sure there will be some discussions about that, but I can't preempt those discussions until she's here.
How good would the money be?
Oh, any money to assist people, and it's likely to be people who have particularly personally challenging circumstances, and in that situation I think any assistance that people can get will be welcome.
Just finally, I think you spoke on radio this morning that you know the family that's cottage was destroyed, is that correct?
I know of the family.
Okay. Do you know how they're doing? And can you talk to sort of how, obviously not well, but...
I think it's a real challenge for them. My understanding is that they weren't able to get home to take anything out, so everything, all their personal effects are gone, so that's really extremely challenging, and that's probably far more important than the value of the property or the house.
You're going to try and give them a call today?
I will, yeah.
Has there been any reports of looting or burglary in the cordoned off zones?
So no, we've had no reports that I'm aware of to date around either of those two concerns. We continue 24/7 operation in relation to providing patrols around the perimeter. We would ask people to stay away from the fire affected area, and if you don't have a reason to be in that area, then do not go to the area.
Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you, guys.
A forecast for 2019, and they're forecasting 1.1 for 2019, but what they're forecasting for the period 2019 to 2023, the global mean temperature